Welcome back. We are back, and the conversation is growing. Social, we are talking about social movements,
Yes.
and the leadership of social movements. Eric,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of what we've seen.
Yes.
And even currently in our country, I mean, we have only, I think, a name that has been featuring. It's one name. And we have seen what has happened. What would you begin to say as a caution for the Gen Zs? Just speak from here, saying the caution you see that should be taken.
I think what we need is obviously to register a body that can represent our values, at these decision-making tables. And I feel like this body should, recruit people who, subscribe to certain to certain values, right? Integrity is one of them. We need people who are honest. We need people who, can be trusted with resources, So I feel like whatever body we are creating has got to be based on, on extremely strong values. And I think anyone that's coming into that body, there should be like checks and balances and say, look, if you're going to represent us at this level, honesty is something that's non-negotiable. Integrity is something that's also non-negotiable. And I feel like if we set that up, and if we have the right people on board, because at the end of the day, as much as it's organic, we've been talking about, political parties and, having people, Gen Zs, because in the coming elections will be the biggest voting bloc. So if we can create a body, and if we say, look, from day one, we subscribe to certain values, that would be, because what we see right now is the political parties, they're just campaign tools. 5 years, they come, in the next election, they're nowhere to be seen, right? They're just there for convenience. But if we build parties, and if we build bodies that are based on strong values, that I think would be the most important, because we're not seeing much growth, economically as a country. I think one of the very great things about this movement is that we're starting to see that look, we have a generation of people who, have been taught well by their parents, that, they've gone to school, they've gone to church. They want to see actual goodwill from the leaders.
And actually they have
we
values.
delegate. Yeah, they have values.
And one of the key things, I have to give it up, this Gen Z has values.
Yeah.
And they're very clear values. If you can't do this, we don't want you.
Yeah.
you know. And Wacera, grassroots movements. The place of grassroots movements in this mobilization. What do you see there?
Grassroots movement.
Because you see, there's an argument. These things are in the city. There are people who can access internet, isn't it? But do you think we have people down in Lokitang who really feel? And by the way, there are people who are even sending clips, and you're showing, young people saying, "Sasa tumekwama huku kwa vijiji. There's nothing going on. We have a governor, we have a budget, but we don't know what's going on."
Yes. So as I was saying, grassroots movements do have a role to play in all of this, and the role that they have to play is they're the ones that have access to the people. So if you go to urban settlements in Nairobi, there's countless grassroots organizations that are doing that work. When you go to specific rural areas, there are countless grassroots organizations that are doing that work. I think the example I'll give is, I think of the Meru governor who was almost impeached.
Yes.
You know what helped them to impeach him? Was the grassroots organizations that were carrying out civic education and had been carrying out civic education for like 10 years before that. So they're there, they're not recognized, but they're doing this work. So, and the thing is, when you mobilize people in a community around a cause organically, institutions and structures start to form. Now, I wouldn't know what grassroots organization is in like a village in Isiolo, but I know for a fact there are, like, especially in major places, there are already grassroots organizations.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, we need to not ignore them. They are the tools.
You cannot.
Yeah, they are the tools that empower people. Something you said is like, we're a generation that has been educated. We're the generation that grew up off of Kibaki's free education thing. That's why we are so knowledgeable. We know so much. And that's the thing. The information that I have access to in comparison to someone in the middle of nowhere is more or less the same. As long as you have a gadget and you went to school and you know how to read, you have access.
And just on that, mobile penetration is in Kenya is 70, almost 80%, right? One of the highest in Africa, one of the highest actually in the world. So as much as the grassroots organizations, we saw 30 out of 47 counties, you know, having some sorts of protests, right? And these are people who've been mobilized, you know, literally just through social media. But I feel like if we take it a step further, and, you know, because still in Kenya, radio is one of the most popular media tools. So if we can also, we've spoken about, you know, how media has agenda. If, you know, as Gen Zs, you know, if we can also push this agenda on all of these channels, I feel like, one, we'd raise civic education, and two, you know, mobilizing for subsequent elections, and, you know, mobilizing against, you know, actual issues and not on tribal basis would be possible, you know.
The tools or the mediums of, you know, disseminating this information, when you talk about TV, radio, these are owned by people, and they are not owned by Gen Zs. And these are business tools. These are, I mean, they will choose how they are used, and their business interests.
That's a good point.
So I think I think there's going to be a lot of consideration, though you still need them. And as you talk about ethical leadership and integrity, what do you think, have we, apart from government, corporations, you know, and even into the workforce today, you know, for you to survive in business and all that, do you really believe there's been a clear ethical integrity, you know, ethical leadership? It's just your view.
I would say yes and no. It depends on what organizations you're looking at. So the thing, as you said, like, for example, with the media houses, is a business driven. It's the same thing as private institutions. The private sector is business driven, it's capital driven. So for them, their aim is to increase capital, whether that means they're going to kill 100 people or help 10 people. So right now, I feel like the private sector is in an interesting place right now. They can either say, okay, how do we hold the government accountable? But at the same time, you're showing Gen Z that you want to hold the government accountable. But we Gen Zs will go look back and see what work you've done. And then we'll also hold you accountable.
Exactly.
So they have the ability to, actually push our movement forward. It's just that it will reach a point where their chickens will come home to roost, because they have histories, they have times where they have ignored people and sought other things, profit, for example. But I will say, like, it brings me hope, because I know for a fact right now the private sector is wondering, okay, how do we engage with this? How do we play? What role do we have to play? Because even them, they're feeling it. As you're saying, economically, we're not growing as a country. That affects them. So they have a role to play. So,
it affects them, but at the end of the day, corporations have been known for also not having clear ethical values. She has said something very clear. I pick words. Accountability. So there has to be you know, what would be a suggestion where there is accountability on both sides? Gen Z want to see accountability. How do they now take you to accountability, to make you accountable? And then the other side also must be accountable, because you know, you have to mirror, isn't it? So even in your agenda and in your organic growth, what would you say? How accountable are you for you? You see, they normally say your obedience must be really full for you to judge obedience. the accountability right now among your mobilization has been super. Do you think now, as you continue like that, how accountable are you going to be, and so that you can literally call men to accountability, because this time you have called them to accountability and they have to come clean. What is your future?
I think on accountability, and I'll just take us a little bit back. We speak in Kenya, the biggest employer is actually government, right? But even when it comes to public participation, it's a lot of the private sector, a lot of these bodies that actually get, go to these forums, and they represent their views, right? So
let me just help you there. There's something amazing you learn about public participation. Somebody argued something, and it was a civil society leader, and he was very grieved, and he said, every time there's public participation, the right people don't go for those participations because we don't care about public participation. We don't care. I mean, you ask most of the guys going out on riot, they ask them how many of them attended the budget, this finance bill that was going around.
Exactly.
You'll be amazed by the people who went.
I think it's also a matter of information, because me, nasikianga hizi vitu za public participation after they happen.
Yeah, you just see them on news, right?
So that's what I'm saying. Like, as you said, media has an agenda. But as you say, media has an agenda. If the media wanted to actually act as a tool of accountability, then they would be announcing every time after. I still remember when I was young, when the 2010 constitution used to be, was being, was being put forth so that we could vote for it. Hakuna siku ungelala bila kusikia story ya constitution on NTV, on Citizen didn't exist then, on NTV or on KTN. You always had it. So it's also another thing to realize, whose interests are they serving for the fact that the right people are not going for public participation.
But you see, they have the voice.
That's what I'm saying. So that's the thing, whose interests are they serving? Because the fact that people are not publicly participating is the issue, is the reason why we're in this situation right now. It's because the government has deliberately ensured that those accountability mechanisms are not being, one, respected and upheld. If you look at the three arms of government, that's an accountability mechanism in itself. The executive, the legislature, and the legislature is the judiciary. So the legislature is now the the National Assembly, where people pass laws. The executive is the president who signs them. The judiciary is the people who enforce those laws. That's an accountability mechanism in itself. But if you look at the country, how many times has the executive ignored judiciary laws?
All the time.
How many times has the executive influenced the legislature? Again, MPs went to State House before the finance bill reading. Why? One, that was illegal according to the Constitution. So it's also understanding that, yes, we have these tools, but nobody's respecting them, which again goes back to the accountability situation, which is right now we're using social media and we're using our collective information and knowledge to hold those institutions accountable. So it's reached a point where we're actually going after everyone who's upholding this system, from the media, the government, civil society, the private sector. And as you are saying, the private sector has acted, one of the people who actually help create these public participation things to happen. But me, I'll say, what then of other institutions that exist? What, like for example, me, the biggest bone I have to pick is with the church. What is the church doing to teach us on civic education and how to publicly participate? What are grassroots organizations doing? Are they being funded by private institutions, the church, other institutions or community bodies to be able to do that work? The best example I'll fall back on is the 2010 constitution. How they did that campaign, me sometimes I sit down and I'm like, wow, you guys did an amazing job.
They did a good job.
I think for me, and let me ask you this one, because I mean, you are Kenyans who have seen things run. Even those grassroots movements, or even some of these civil movements that we see, the problem comes here when we begin now to trace who is behind it. You see, and now that gives you now, okay, so this is so and so, basically speaking. And we saw that during our campaigns last elections, we began to notice, kumbe this thing is run by These guys. It's funded by these guys. And, you know, you play their tune. Because when they give you money...
pays the piper, pays the...
Yeah. And, I mean, we can't exhaust that thing. I want to ask you something, my friend Eric.
Yeah.
The place of movements and the digital economy.
Place of movement?
I mean, a movement like this, it has now been authenticated that the place of technology, let's even call it technology and innovation, how it has been able to be successful on those wings.
Yeah, I think on that, and just one of the proposals, like most recently, was that, look, for us, you know, who work in the tech space, that, you know, we register a body and then we have to, you know, pay registration fees to that body, and then if you're not compliant, you know, you get hit with hefty fines. What I find with that, and obviously social media and media have made this information available to us, right? Something like that, the effect is that, you know, we hail the gig economy in Kenya. We say, look, we have a very innovative young people. But here you are on the other hand, because a lot of people like me actually learned through YouTube. We learned through LinkedIn Learning and such, these kinds of platforms. But here you are, you're saying, before you practice, you have to, before you even earn some shillings, you know, you have to go and register to a body, and there's a fine if I'm not compliant. Of course, here on one hand, it's positive because, you know, overall, consumers would get higher product, but that would also drive the consumer price a lot higher. So I think the role is just, you know, media has made this information available for most of us, and, you know, when these proposals get released, someone like me, I'll go and look. Me as a tech bro, I'll go and I'll say, look, what does this bill, what does this proposal mean to someone like me? And yeah, I think that's the value in social media, and, you know, just being very, very aware of what's happening.
So using technology to drive what you call leadership agenda.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done with the...
You're a podcaster.
Yes.
The penetration of that into social movements. What would you say?
I'll say, in terms of Kenya, the statistics for Kenyans in listening to podcasts are actually very high, higher than across the continent, actually.
Wow.
Because I'll say for our generation, podcasts have replaced what radio was.
Yeah.
We grew up on radio, hearing it.
Kabisa.
Asubuhi unaamka, you're listening to radio. When you're cleaning, you're listening to radio. When you're driving, you're listening to radio. When you're on the matatu, you're listening to radio. But now, because we have a gadget, we have this phone, you're able to find a podcast that interests you. So you listen to that, and then you, So I will say, in terms of penetration of podcasts, like for me, a lot of the historical learning that I've done in terms of social movements and politics has been through podcasts. Because I find it a lot easier to listen than to read. Because again, I feel like we've reached a point where, one, our attention spans are not that very good. So kusoma, like, I don't read the way I used to read when I was in primary school or high school. Another thing is they're used as an effective tool, one, to disseminate information, and to also build community around that. As a podcaster, my podcast is on culture and society with a lot of politics, actually. So the reality is I've been able to connect now with other podcasts that are very similar to what I do. So yes. So I usually say media and the technological side has a very big role to play. I think one thing I'd encourage listeners to find is a book written by Nanjala Nyabaloa. I forget the name of the book, but it's about digital democracy in Kenya. She explains how social media is used as a tool to shape politics and different types of happenings in Kenya.
Kabisa.
Do you think, let me throw us under the bus, do you think media is actually bringing out the best out of, let's take this matter out, beyond just showing the violence? Are the issues being hidden behind, you know, there's a way you can focus on one thing and you get lost on the real agenda. And do you think our media has done that?
100%.
I think they need to pull up their socks, because I find the media, because also at work I also work with in the media department and in the marketing department, and I see how even just like we were on the streets on Sunday when we did a church protest, right? And you know, extremely peaceful. Actually, the mission for that specific protest was just to say, look, as young believers, we as Christians, where we have our stand and we have our, we're going to say this about the finance bill, but that was our thing. We were singing chants, we were singing like worship songs, but on social media and on news, what was actually being depicted was not our main message. So you see, on the ground, your message can be one thing, but what gets sent out to the masses is a totally different thing. So I feel like we need to approach these things with a sort of like discerning eye. Just be a bit discerning, and we need media to represent things exactly how they are.
Let me ask you, Wacera, as you answer what you want to say. Do you have true confidence in the media?
No. Yeah, I'll be honest.
You're very blunt.
I'll be very honest. Again, my question that I always tell people is, ask yourself, whose interests are these organizations serving?
Yeah.
I think out of all the different media houses that I've watched document what's been going on, the one person who has given anything remotely close to what we were saying on the ground is Larry Madowo on CNN. Citizen outside. KTN wamejaribu. Sorry. But like it's those ones of, I feel so disheartened because I'm like, we are being killed out here and the media is not covering these stories.
It's in my question is always this one. The main agenda, is it being lost in what maybe the media is so focused on one thing and they are losing the main agenda? And in media school, we learned something. When you find something, there are many sides of a story. You can, right now, we I think for me, we've not looked at very many sides of a story. We are focused on one.
Exactly.
So is your story going to be lost?
I hope not. I hope not.
Because you see, these are the tools of dissemination that are there. But then I want to pick her point. She said the social media space and what you say that now the penetration is more trusted. And I think this began during elections. People now know I don't need to go to
TV. Actually, and you see, we as Gen Zs, we get information, we get news from other sources. People are like, right now I don't have to wait until 9 o'clock to see what happened in the country. I can see an update literally that happened 5 minutes ago just from Twitter. So the way we are consuming media is very different, and I liked her point on podcasters and things like the apps that are out there, Spotify. You can learn a lot from these platforms, and you find someone just chilling in their room, speaking with an audience of, they probably have an audience of hundreds of thousands, millions of people. They're actually bigger than some of these radio stations. So we're seeing a paradigm shift in the way business is done, and I feel like it's also a challenge for media houses, traditional media to go with the times.
You know what I'm hearing? We're going back to where we started. She said something, and you also said it, that we are so stuck.
Yeah, we need to innovate as a people.
We are so stuck on, if TV is not said it.
Yeah. No. We need to.
Gen Z hivyo mwenye kona TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, like
they get news like this, man.
And that's another thing. I feel like I was seeing a conversation on Twitter. Twitter is where a good amount of people are. But TikTok, I'm telling you, if you tell a media person of your generation to go onto TikTok, kichwa yake italipuka.
And
there's so much. The rate and the information that's coming out. Even me personally, sometimes I'm just
it's crazy. It's crazy. And like I was saying, by 2027, will be 18 million Gen Zs in Kenya. You see, average age in Africa is 19. So is a 19-year-old going to be waiting for news at 7 o'clock or at 9 o'clock? They'll wait and see, look, what are people saying on social media? So it's a challenge for not just within the media space, but even across other areas, other sectors, that we can't keep on staying to the past.
Yeah.
We have to think of ways to, we're here. We have come this far. We made this sort of progress, in our infrastructure, in our education, in our healthcare. How can we have what is because it's a globalized economy.
Yeah.
Right now, iPhones are assembled in China and sold in America, right? We sell our tea to Europe and we sell our tea to Asia. It's a globalized economy. It's a challenge for also our young people to, think of ways to tap into, 21st century jobs and 21st century opportunities. And I think one of the things that we've seen clearly is that Gen Zs are we're pushing the reality is young people in Africa want to access the same opportunities that people in Europe. It might not be very possible, but we have to have a paradigm shift in our.
I think it's also one of those things where a lot of Kenyans are saying we don't want to leave the country to look for opportunities. We want to build those opportunities here. That's also a narrative that's across the continent. Young people want to stay in their countries, grow up here, build families and institutions. And that's another reason why this movement is so heartfelt for a lot of us.
We're very patriotic.
And I really support that beat of building our own economies. And let me ask you, we are about to finish. Unfortunately, we're about less than a minute. I had some people say Jay-Z's our enemies. So whose enemy are you, or who's your enemy here?
We're friends of
we are
Kenyans.
Friends of everybody.
We're friends of Kenyans.
Yeah,
I think the enemy is corruption and impunity. That's what it is. Yeah.
We've got to fix it.
We have to fix it by hook or crook.
Fix it. I want you to give. I want you to begin to wind down and just a shout out to your guys and what you think. What should we do in just less than a minute? In less than half a minute.
What we should do? We should keep up the momentum. We've started something beautiful. Let us hold on to, the values that we are proposing on Twitter. Let's continue mobilizing. Let's mobilize based on issues. Let's remain tribeless, and let's, build a better Kenya for ourselves and for our children.
Yeah.
Wacera.
Me, I'll say, let us continue educating ourselves and learning. Because right now, with the whole movement, knowledge has been the biggest tool that has empowered us. So let us keep teaching ourselves, teaching everyone, and keep the hope up. One thing we need to realize, this is a marathon we're running. We're not doing a sprint. Kenya won't change overnight. These are issues that have plagued our country for a very long time. And as Eric said, these are values that we need to continue upholding. And also have a community around you. I usually like saying, roll up na rende. Make sure you have a rende of people around you.
You're going to be my rende.
who have good values, who will hold you accountable, who will check you. Kuambia, hey, by the way, Eric hapo umeenda sideways, Yeah, because you can't do this alone.
Eric,
yes.
Do you have a word for the church? Because we somebody has to say something.
A word for the church is, I believe the church needs to, and this is interesting. I think I've just had a deja vu moment.
You need to wrap up.
No, but I think let's be extremely candid about the issues that are plaguing our people. Let's not try to avoid them, and let's actually hit the hammer, the nail on the head. Wow. Because I think one thing we've seen is the church, people want to believe in something. Young people want to believe in something. And so if, they're going to church and they're not hearing, hard truths, or, people, proposing things that, or speaking about things that, they are very against, we need to be objective as a church.
Message home. So church, sort out those issues. Speak candid on the things. I think the words have been said well. Wacera and Eric have done it. I think this is the best panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm so pleased to have you. I think we appreciate you. If you feel we have something we need to put out there, you're free to come and talk to us. Elevate appreciates you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we could have for today. God bless you. Keep it elevate.